Greetings, everyone. This is the Crossing Ball, and I'm your professor of the hour, here to comment on a debate between David Wood and Matt Dillahunty. Matt Dillahunty, he's a famous atheist. He's done lots of debates. He's known for supposedly demolishing theists. A little secret, he jumps from one sense of a word to another, and through confusing his interlocutor, he gives the appearance of winning. He just really avoids the point. That's pretty much his strategy. Now, David Wood, he's the host of Apologetics Roadshow, and he's a former philosophy professor. He's going to be arguing for God. And the debate is, what makes a better foundation for ethics? Is it God or secular humanism? So let's listen to David's opening statement on this debate.
All right, well, hello everyone. I'd like to thank James from Modern Day Debate for setting up this exchange and Matt for representing secular humanism. Even though I have complete intellectual contempt for certain positions, I always respect people and organizations that are willing to defend their views and subject them to critical examination. Now, as far as I can tell, in this debate, we're not focusing on whether atheism is true or whether theism is true. And instead, we're focusing on a fairly narrow topic, namely whether secular humanism or theism provides a better foundation for morality. Spoiler alert, theism does. Theism can account for morality quite easily. Non-theistic ideologies can't. And if it weren't for feelings and cultural indoctrination getting in the way, every atheist on the planet would agree with me. But many contemporary atheists, instead of simply acknowledging the implications of their position, try to ground morality in something other than God. Just to be clear, when we talk about morality, we're talking about things like moral obligations. Human beings have a moral obligation to do certain things and not to do other things. Moral value, some things are intrinsically good. Moral responsibility, certain actions make us worthy of praise or blame. Moral improvement, people become better or worse, and so on. This is what we mean by morality. Of course, you can always radically redefine morality so that it bears little resemblance to anything we normally mean, but radically redefining morality isn't providing a foundation for morality, it's mutilating it. We're looking for a foundation, not mutilation. Now, I'm going to share my perspective, but I want to do so in a way that atheists can relate to. And if atheists can relate to anything, they can relate to asking people for evidence and being skeptical. So imagine this scenario, atheists. You walk into a church and you meet some Christians. You ask the Christians, why do you believe in God? And they reply, well, we just know that God exists and we feel the presence of God. You're a little confused, so you ask, but what evidence do you have that God exists? And the Christians respond, evidence? We don't need evidence. We already told you we know that God exists and we feel his presence. We know and we feel. No further questions. Needless to say, atheists would not be very impressed with this response. Atheists would not take Christians saying, I just know or I feel the presence of God as any kind of evidence that God exists. Now, my atheist friends, if you can recall how you feel when a Christian tells you that he doesn't need evidence because he just knows God exists, now you know exactly how I feel every time I ask an atheist to defend the moral claims and moral judgments he's making.
Okay, we won't listen to the rest of it. There's about 5-10 more minutes of this. Essentially, what Wood's position is that secular humanists base their foundation on the presence of values, not why we have these values. A foundation should tell us, ultimately this is Wood's position, a foundation should tell us why we have these shared beliefs and values. Otherwise, the debate would be, how do we achieve these universally shared beliefs? A foundation is the basis for values. A praxis is how to achieve them. Wood is asserting that secular humanists have no foundation aside from a subjective, well, it's just the way it is. So Wood is arguing, and he doesn't mention it. He hadn't mentioned it yet, that God serves as the foundation for ethics, as opposed to the idea that secular humanists and their principles have no foundation. They are just what we say, what we feel, what we think about it. So that's David's. Now let's listen to Matt's opening statement. Let's get here. And we're going to listen to a little bit of his, and we're going to explain, after he gives a little bit of his opening statement, we're going to explain what he's ultimately saying. So let's listen.
For you, Matt, the floor is all yours.
All right. Hi, and thanks to David and Modern Day Debate for doing this. I was trying to take a bunch of notes. Sometimes I wonder why I bother showing up, as long as opponents are going to try to present both sides in a fictional straw man. This started off as, hey, let's do which makes a better account of ethics, God or atheism. And I pointed out rightly that atheism isn't an ethical system at all, and that...
First, I'd like to address, just really quick, Matt attempting to suggest that David presented a fictional straw man. That's only from Matt's perspective, that David has an opposing view. A straw man is not having an opposing view and characterizing the other person's position as such. So I just wanted to point that out. He's not presenting a straw man. He's just stating that they don't have a foundation. He thinks they do. So let's hear what Matt says is the foundation for ethics.
Instead, I should be defending secular humanism, which is in fact a system that addresses ethics and morality. I tried to get this changed a little more clearly to Christianity versus secular humanism, because Christianity at least can be presented as if it is a moral system or as if it makes moral pronouncements. Because
again, Matt seems to be suggesting that they're arguing about a moral system, not a moral foundation. Those are two different things. A system is servicing a foundation. A foundation is the basis for those ethics in the first place. So I think he already is confused, and he's trying to change the debate itself and trying to switch between a foundation, which is much harder to defend, than a system, which is much easier to defend. But let's continue.
the fact is, God isn't a philosophy. It's not a system. It's not a worldview. It is a proposed entity. Secular humanism is entirely focused on discovering and promoting the best methods of improving human life. No God has been shown to exist. There isn't agreement on which God exists or which one might exist or what it wants or what it thinks. In fact, there's chaotic disagreement with countless religions and countless denominations among them. The various God models don't necessarily have human best interest at heart. How do we demonstrate that a God, whatever it happens to think about morality, has any interest in human affairs or what it thinks is right and wrong? What we have is not information about God, but speculation about God from human beings, and the speculation doesn't agree. In order for something to serve as a foundation for anything, any sort of system, any sort of evaluation, in order to be evaluated as a foundation, what we need are some principles. Not merely a list of do this or don't do that, but principles that this foundation encourages. Things like individual autonomy, sovereignty, the recognition that we're seeking a better world for human beings, the recognition of what we've learned so far, where we have discovered that we were right and where we have discovered that we were wrong, the recognition that it's about us and it's up to us. Now, morality is often, confusingly defined. David wants to say that, the atheists are going to completely misdefine it as if it's not morality anymore. And I don't know where the word objective came from, because the word objective doesn't appear in the debate title, nor am I here saying in any way that there are objective, intrinsic moral values or truths in anywhere. So I would agree that if I'm going to be skeptical and require...
Actually, and another thing I must say, later on in the debate, I'm not going to play the part, but there is another part where he admits that there are objective moral values. It's just those objective moral values are not outside of humans themselves. He finds that these objective moral values develop or emerge, and we'll talk about that a little bit after we listen to a little bit more of his opening statement, that they emerge between individuals and humans. So he does believe in objective moral values. He just doesn't believe that they're outside of humans. So he's kind of contradicting himself right there. But let's continue.
Evidence for things. If someone wants to say that there is a God who serves as a foundation for objective moral truths, then let them present the evidence for that. But my position is that as far as I can tell, there are no objective moral, no requirement that one care about well-being or human suffering or human flourishing or any of that. There's nothing about the universe that requires that we care about that. And yet, we do. This is what we've always talked about when it comes to morality. We are talking about how do humans interact? What are the consequences of our actions? Do those...
Okay, I think that's enough for now. He just continues to kind of emphasize those points. So Matt, first off, changes the debate from a foundation for ethics to defending ethical statements that are presumably derived from secular humanism. If there is a foundation, it's some emergent set of standards that develop from others coming together to define what flourishing means, as I had mentioned before. Even though he's saying that it's not objective, he does believe that it's objective in so much as it's humans coming together. He incorrectly identifies theistic ethics, or ethics derived from a belief in God, as literal pronouncements from God in the Bible. So he's attacking the system of ethics, not the foundation. And he's attacking the system because he believes, or he states, and he doesn't state it here, but he'll state it later. And if you want, you can listen to the whole debate to hear where he does criticize what he sees as being a theistic system of ethics. He takes literal pronouncements from God that we find in the Bible. However, he takes a very sophomoric view of hermeneutics and assumes that theism cannot identify moral reasoning with God's revelation. In other words, a foundation for ethics from God needn't imply rules set in stone, but is best understood as moral reasoning. And this moral reasoning is equivalent with rational thought. In short, secular humanism could be and can be founded on God. So the principles you see in secular humanism needn't be based on atheism, naturalism. They could be based on theism. And he's not telling us that. Because we're talking about foundations, we're not talking about the actual system or the principle itself. So the principles of secular humanism, the system of secular humanism, could be founded in a theistic framework of the world. It could be that God is the divine foundation for this revelation. And ultimately, reason could be a divine revelation and not unique to the brains of higher mammals. So I think that's important to point out. Let's go to another part in the opening statement where he talks about his view having a better count for ethics.
On a debate for doing this, I was trying to take a bunch of notes. Sometimes I wonder why I bother showing up as long as opponents are going to try to present both sides in a fictional straw man. This started off as, hey, let's do which makes a better account of ethics, God or atheism. And I pointed out rightly that atheism isn't an ethical system at all.
So right here, Matt states what makes a better account for ethics, God or atheism. And he rightly points out that atheism is not a system of ethics. And he suggested that they address secular humanism, which addresses an account of ethics. He then claims he tried to get it changed to Christianity from God, since Christianity makes ethical claims and God claims do not. He then decries David's insistence that he hadn't the time to do so and preferred theism. He later explains that ethics is based on objectively verifiable ethical conditions, but these emerge with respect to individuals coming together in a community, and they do not exist apart from humans. Let me make a quick, or let me give you a quick rundown of what emergentism is and what kind of claims are reflected in emergentism. This is a belief that simple, basic phenomena, everything from atoms to neurons to individuals themselves, when they come together in a specific pattern, produce everything from qualities to consciousness to concepts, ideas, and morals themselves. The problem with this, one cannot predict these emergent features prior to their emergence. You cannot observe, you cannot see these emergent properties in the parts themselves, in the things themselves. They're not observed or evident in the individual parts that come together. For instance, one cannot observe pieces of consciousness in individual neurons. You don't see them. One cannot observe qualities in atoms alone. Once the atoms come together, then magically they appear. One cannot observe moral intuitions in individuals alone. You don't see social, moral obligations until you have people coming together. The emergence ultimately is magical. So when atheists claim that theists believe in supernaturalism, which they don't, and it's magical thinking, they are the ones that are actually believing in magic because of their emergentism, which stems from their naturalist worldview. An alternative, one observes purpose. So here's an alternative to emergentism. One can observe purpose, design, beauty, goodness, intentionality, care, concern in the world itself without having to see it specifically in humans coming together. I don't have to look at humans coming together, observe humans coming together, or humans in and of themselves, and not observe all of these wonderful things in the world. We see bad things too, but we also see these wonderful things. Matt does not consider the possibility that Sorge, which is a German word for concern, which was popularized by the philosophy of Heidegger in his views on what's called Dasein, or being in the world, doesn't consider the possibility that the Sorge, this concern, the intentionality, which a lot of panpsychists see, and it's suggested in panpsychism, he never considers that it's possible that this exists in the world. If this is the case, which many observe it to be, many people, I would say most people in the world, see this this content, purpose, they see design, they see beauty, they see goodness, they see intentionality and volition and agency and act. If that's the case, this would be God, which is love. So there's your evidence, Matt. There's your evidence. It's evidenced in observation. The fact that you don't observe it doesn't mean that other people don't observe it. You may not observe it because you're not used to seeing it, because you've ignored it, because for a variety of reasons. But just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. All right, so let's go to another portion of the debate, distinguishing between rules and principles. So here, let's listen to what Matt has to say.
Society, then the consequences are minimized. How's God fix it?
How's God fix what?
Any of this stuff, any objection, you appealing to God solves nothing.
So Matt here's suggesting that when somebody says that ethics is founded, when ethics is founded upon God and theism, that by appealing to a God, how does that change any of these principles, right? Of course, David could have easily thrown that back at Matt and says, well, how can you assume that naturalism would answer this, being a naturalist? But let's just assume, how does God, or the assumption of God, serve as a foundation? Well, as we said earlier, he's confusing foundations with systems. I don't have to put God into a system of ethics. But a foundation for ethics can be, and is, as David argued, and as I would argue, is better founded upon a principle of God, as opposed to a principle of naturalism, where we have emergentism, as I just mentioned, some of the problems with emergentism, the catastrophic problems. But see, here's the problem. He's distinguishing between rules or principles through reason and simple commands, as commands in the Bible. So the Bible tells you to do this, tells you to do that, or it seems that the Bible does. The Bible is not merely a book of laws or rules. It's also a book of inspirational stories. As Robert Frost said, we cannot think things out, we have to see them acted out. Stories inspire. They inspire us. They inspire us kind of like fuel, what fuel does to the engines of a car. If you think of our minds like a car, they give fuel to that, right? And the fuel are the stories. If the stories are bad, they will destroy us. So if we have bad stories, and I would argue that a bad story would be naturalism. I would argue that a bad story is atheism. A good story would be God, intention. We're created out of love. We're created out of concern and care. That would be a better story, and that inspires us, and that's a much better foundation for ethics because it inspires us to come up with good reasons for why we should pursue the good. How does God solve it? He gives a foundation for believing why we are ethical. One doesn't have to believe in order to act, as Jesus states in Matthew 21. Now, belief and trust are not necessarily the same thing. If the universe, if the world is imbued with care, with concern, we need to trust that concern. That is the essence of God, and we're trusting in God. One example of this is found in Matthew 24, when Jesus tells the parable of the man who owns a vineyard. And he's a father and he has two sons. He's leaving the vineyard, but he's going to come back. And he asks his two sons, each of them individually, if they could take care of the vineyard while he's gone. The one son promises he will, but unfortunately, while the father is gone, he does nothing. Now, the one son says he's not going to help. He doesn't have time or whatever. But he does. He helps, and he actually tends to the vineyard. Jesus asks which one did the will of his father. Now, Matt may not believe in God, may not have belief in a God, but as long as he acts as though there is a God, as long as he acts as though the universe has care and concern, and that he's obligated to follow those concerns and that love, that's all that matters. And that's what Jesus is telling us. So I think Matt just doesn't understand Christianity all that much. At least it doesn't seem like that to me. Now, here's the last thing we're going to watch from this debate. Again, if you want to watch the whole debate, it's over 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours. If you'd like to watch it, I'll leave a link to it in the description for this video. But in this clip, Matt is questioning the credentials of David. David claims he's a philosopher, and here's what he tells him.
We're talking about two different things. One, we're talking about Christianity as a system of ethics. Yeah, I'm a philosopher. So if we're talking about like a moral
I dispute
argument,
that, but
that I'm a philosopher.
yeah.
I have a PhD in philosophy.
And
Okay.
And if you notice, he said, and. See, the tactic is poisoning of the well. Matt knows that the audience will then question David's credentials. The question is Matt an academic? Is he a scholar? David has a PhD, which means a committee made up of credentialed academics reviewed his work. They reviewed his research and came to the conclusion he has adequate knowledge about philosophy. As far as I can tell, Matt's only knowledge of philosophy comes from memorizing Wikipedia pages, which lacks the nuance, the specificity of the discipline, and like reading a book from the middle, gives little background to the whole story of philosophy. Ultimately, to sum up this debate, Matt lacks the decorum, the temperance that comes from real scholarship. Matt is one that cannot or does not seek to understand others and only expresses one's own views without allowing that view to be tempered by others of equal or greater intellect. The fact that Dillahunty presents belief in God as superficially stupid and offers an incredibly childish view of theism, he ignores that many with greater intellect, study, scholarly achievements, and intellectual integrity and honesty hold to that view. Many people disagree with him, and many of those people have at least as much knowledge and background in a particular discipline than he does, but most and many have more. A real scholar would respectfully disagree, although they wouldn't be convinced, but that disagreement being on a more sensible set of arguments than Sky Daddy and other equally silly notions. See, Matt jumps from one sense of a word, the praxis and connotations, to another, its denotative or ontological sense. I find that he is an angry man, hurt by religion, and instead of seeking to find answers, he seeks to hurt others that he regards as complicit in the pain he has experienced. Should you debate Matt if you are a serious intellectual? I would say emphatically no. Not because he may beat you in a debate, because he doesn't want to debate. He wants to punish. And if I were playing against a football team that didn't care about scoring points and only wanted to take out my players, I simply wouldn't play. So my advice to you, if you're ever in a situation where you are going to have a serious debate with Matt Dillahunty, don't play his game. Or as most of the new atheists, they play the same way he does. They don't play. They just want to hurt those who disagree with them.